Why are rural areas more conservative? The real answer to this question is much more nuanced than most of the answers you're getting. The first thing to realize is that everyone has problems, and those problems are different based on your circumstances. If you live in the city, high gas prices are less likely to impact you in a huge way. If you live in an area where the closest grocery store is 20+ miles away and work is an 80-mile round trip every day, gas prices are much more likely to impact your ability to do things like pay your bills. Conversely, if you live in the city, gun crime is a serious concern. If you live in a rural area, guns are tools that are used for feeding your family and defending yourself because the police are no less than an hour away, at best. In both instances, it's hard to empathize with someone whose problems seem less serious than yours. And this goes both ways. I've had this conversation with people before. I've had folks from the city tell me that people should move to more populated areas so they don't have to travel as far, so they don't have to spend as much driving around. I've had this conversation with people from rural areas, and they tell me that people who are worried about gun crime should move to a place with less gun crime. Problems solved. Except it's not. Both groups have real issues that impact their lives in very real, very different ways. People are often blinded by their own problems, and we are prone to believing people with a different worldview believe what they believe because they are stupid or evil or uneducated or brainwashed, or because they believe insert your cable news station of choice talking point here. The simple fact is that everyone has problems that are real. Understanding viewpoints different from your own is hard to do, especially when you don't want to and you're insulated in a community of people who believe the same things you believe. People in urban areas are more likely to take on a more socialistic set of beliefs, which isn't surprising given that people in cities rely on other people so many more aspects of their day-to-day lives. People in rural areas are more likely to take on a conservative set of beliefs, which isn't surprising because they rely on so many fewer people in their day-to-day lives. And both sets of people, unsurprisingly, dismiss the other group of people because the issues that those people face are so foreign. They're hard to even conceive of. It's a complex issue, and no one seems to want to have a conversation with any sense of nuance. Everyone wants to boil the other side down to a couple of talking points so that they're easy to dismiss. And frankly, that's the dumbest thing we could do. Yet I see it every day. Source: grew up in a conservative rural area. Moved to a medium-sized city. Beliefs have changed in major ways due to my experiences in both urban and rural settings. Neither side is wrong. Neither side has it worse. 99% of us share a common enemy, but we're busy fighting with each other. I lived in a very affluent rural town that was home to a fairly large business that was still family-owned. I found that there was a lot of localized socialism. They helped each other a lot. They plowed roads to be nice. They built the dugouts for the high school. Most people pulled their own weight. Most had a farm in their family and would help other farmers. They had a way of life. They were also mostly religious. They want nothing to do with city folk, and they don't want to pay taxes for anything outside of their town. Also, if you don't like it, they want you to leave. An argument I've heard is that in conservative areas people are much more dependent on their immediate community, and government services are more distant and less reliable, so they develop a much more insular worldview with less compassion for distant different groups, and less trust in government, and potentially resentment for those who can. Yeesh. Lots of people saying it all comes down to lack of education and religion amongst other things. But here I am, a university-educated individual who questions religion, who lives in a rural community, but would say I'm a slightly left-leaning conservative. A lot of the conservatism around here comes from what few have said. Hate for taxes that are spent on services that we rarely see. Concern that we spend frivolously when we are struggling with basic issues. And currently, Canada are having issues arguing for our ability to own firearms, which many of us need as we hunt for a good portion of the meat we go through in a year. The last one relates heavily to the whole services we never see, as it currently feels as though the other side ignores another and just gets told to deal with it. As a former rural person, I think it's because social norms change slowly in rural areas, even with internet, TV, etc. While these certainly have influence, things that are considered the norm are very ingrained and tend to reflect mores rooted in the past. Don't underestimate the power of religion. Also, the sense of ought is a very strong force. I see a lot of comments about how rural communities don't want their hard-earned tax dollars to leave the area and go to the big city. When I lived in a small, rural town for about 3 years, it was extremely obvious that local taxes didn't finance anything. The best maintained roads in the town were state-owned and maintained using federal tax money. Infrastructure improvements like water or sewer upgrades was always paid for by federal or state grants. I live in an urban area now, and I don't care that my tax dollars go to subsidize rural areas. I think it's important that they have access to certain basic amenities, like paved streets and clean drinking water. I just hate the blinders that rural folks seem to have when they think their tax base of 7,000 people could fully fund all the needs of their modern town and the lifestyle they have become accustomed to. This is a global and historical phenomenon, not just current American politics. It likely has to do with the complexity of urban life. People mostly work for others, aren't tied to agricultural labor, and thus economic and social change isn't seen as threatening. Also, pretty much by definition, urban dwellers learn to coexist peacefully with strangers and people who aren't like them. So ultimately, they are more accepting of social change, varied populations, etc., and less attached to the maintenance of traditions. And that pretty much defines the conservative-non-conservative divide. Rural areas by nature have much less influence from outside peoples, cultures and ideas, and so are less influenced by different cultures, people, and ideas, thus less trusting and open to different cultures, people and ideas, and so less open to change towards something different. Therefore they are more conservative. This is the same for every society and culture in the world. They don't come into contact with as many diverse people and ways of thinking. People in rural areas tend to be more self-sufficient, independent. They don't need much infrastructure, transportation, city programs. They want low taxes, free movement, autonomy, deregulation, etc. Mostly items on the conservative electoral agenda. Less collectivism, or at least more local collectivism. Different areas mean different experience is what it mainly boils down to. On the one hand, a liberal who lives in the city may believe in strict gun laws, possibly even banning them altogether because they see more crime in an urban setting, and feel fearful hearing gunshots at night. Meanwhile, a conservative in a rural area may hate gun bans for the fact that they need a way to defend their home from people with malice, considering they live 2,030 minutes from the nearest police station, and also need some way to keep coyotes away from their livestock like chickens. I see several people here saying things that are true, but I think the full picture is more complex than any one of those reasons. People in rural areas are more reliant on family and small community groups, church, neighbors, etc., than they are government, making government seem distant. other and often intrusive. Religion's community plays a role here, often offering the aid and assistance in times need that they don't get anywhere else. And like all people, they have a harder time understanding things outside their own experiences. Lack of education plays a role, but not in the way people often think. Higher education doesn't make one all around smarter, though it may make someone more knowledgeable on 13 subjects. What it does is help stretch and expand a person's worldview. Offers opportunities to meet different people and have the realization that you have more in common than not. To offer some understanding of new things. Small communities in rural areas all over the world tend to be very racially monotone. And it's a common human trait to fear what we don't understand. Things have flipped economically in the last 50 years. Rural areas have become very poor areas. Economic opportunities have dwindled dramatically. The best ways to get ahead are to leave, breaking up the families they depend on. Stolen by liberals in cities. Union busting, offshoring and the opioid crises have decimated the communities they relied on for support. From their perspective, the world, their way of life, is ending, crashing down all around them, so maybe they do need to fight to save it. Unfortunately, they are lashing out at things they fear and misunderstand, but then again, all humans have a tendency to do that. Speaking for myself, I began as a liberal. Over the years, my viewpoints have certainly become more conservative by today's measure. This, I would say, is actually due to more education on my own part after school about the United States and its founding and laws. Reading more about those who formed it, where they got their inspiration, looking into current and past matters, how they were decided in courts using precedent and common law. Age and responsibility plays a role as well. I would say at the end of the day, though, most people are in the middle deep down in their everyday lives. We all just want to live our lives in peace, without someone else telling us what to do. It's the necessary evil of government that ruins things. Lot of overcomplicated answers here. 2 reasons in general. 1. Conservatives want to be left alone. 2. They want to keep as much of the money they make as opposed to giving it to the government who have yet to find a program they can't go over budget on. There is another 100 or 1,000 specific policy issues conservatives will fall on one side or another on, often overwhelmingly. But those 2 things are in the 99% of rural conservatives. Of course, only like 4 of the federal politicians elected by those conservatives actually adhere to those beliefs and vote accordingly. Most of these comments are a huge reason why rural Americans never vote liberal. We are not the unintelligent, racist simpletons portrayed by liberals. There are more millionaires per capita where I live than most sites. Better schools, lower crime rates, and lower costs of living too. Also nicer people that actually look out for their community. Why would they vote to change any of that? Cracked.com did a great article on this a long time ago. Common sense is a necessity here. Less influence. 1. Individualism versus collectivism. 2. Religion versus secularism. 3. Demographical differences.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.